Hey everyone, and welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. Want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm back with another update coming out from the war between Russia and Ukraine, and I've got a huge lineup of news to share with all of you today. Today's date is August 16th, 2025, and it's Saturday. Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend so far. We've got so much news to cover with this update today. We're actually going to spend a lot of time throughout this video talking about yesterday's meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska. I have a lot of updates to share with you. We're actually going to start off with this most recent story coming out today here on your screen. And it says Putin refuses to agree to ceasefire with Ukraine, proposes alternative. During negotiations with Donald Trump in Alaska, Putin did not support the proposal for a ceasefire, proposing instead to sign a comprehensive agreement on ending the war. This was actually a picture that came out yesterday from the conference at the very beginning when Trump and Putin first had met. And we had a scene where a lot of reporters were actually shouting at Vladimir Putin, asking him different questions. And you couldn't really hear anything. There was just so much chatter. And this was actually Putin trying to shout back at one of the reporters. So, yeah, this is a huge story today. Putin not agreeing to a ceasefire. That's allegedly what we mainly got out of the conference yesterday between Trump and Putin. No agreement being signed. We did expect that to be the case. The Kremlin was reporting that, in the last 2 days, actually, that they weren't going to be signing anything at this meeting with Trump. But yeah, Putin not refusing to a ceasefire and also proposing an alternative, which is to sign immediately a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. So Vladimir Putin does not want to stop the fighting inside of Ukraine, but he is open to agreeing to a peace deal, supposedly. Trump is on board with this as well. We're going to be showing you multiple different sources today, lots of mainstream news coming out with different information here regarding the situation between Trump and Putin. So that's mainly what we're going to talk about today. I want to give you as much information as I can to get you caught up on this situation. We're going to jump into this. We're going to hop on over here to X with Nexta. And we'll start off with this conference yesterday between Trump and Putin. They did hold like a press conference, holding some statements yesterday. So we're going to go over that first. It says the press conference of Putin and Trump has concluded. Key points from Vladimir Putin's statements. Here's what Putin said during the press conference. Vladimir Putin called his talks with Donald Trump constructive and useful. Russia and the United States are close neighbors despite being separated by an ocean. Putin emphasized that during his meeting with Donald Trump in Alaska, he greeted him as a neighbor. Relations between Russia and the United States have fallen to their lowest point since the Cold War, during the time when there were no direct contacts between the leaders. Russia sees a willingness from the Trump administration to help resolve the Ukrainian crisis. Russia is sincerely interested in putting an end to the conflict in Ukraine. Russia wants the settlement in Ukraine to be long-term. Vladimir Putin thanked Donald Trump for the trusting tone of their conversation. And here's the key points from Donald Trump's statements. Donald Trump described his meeting with Vladimir Putin as very productive. U.S. President said he would call Zelensky and NATO colleagues to brief them on the content of his meeting with Putin. Trump said he and Vladimir Putin managed to agree on many points regarding the Ukrainian issue, but some matters still remain unresolved. And Trump did not call the understanding reached with Putin on Ukraine a deal, noting that agreement from all sides would be required. So as you can see, nothing really constructive came from this meeting. No deal was signed, no ceasefire, no nothing like that. All we really got out of this meeting was potential meetings being scheduled in the future. We're going to be seeing actually coming up on Monday, Zelensky's going to be arriving in Washington, D.C. We'll talk about that. And he'll be meeting with Donald Trump. And also we could have European leaders arriving in Washington, D.C. as well on Monday. And then aside from that, we might see a trilateral meeting between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky in the future. But aside from that, nothing really constructive came from this meeting between Trump and Putin yesterday. So let's move on to another one now from Anton Yurenko. President Trump says, so just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them, European countries, what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting and many points were agreed to. There are just very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant. But we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. That was Trump yesterday. Let me just show you this quick clip of him saying that.
So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to think. So just to put it.
So Trump appears to be very positive coming out from this meeting, but again, they didn't agree to anything super serious yet. There's still going to have to be a lot of conversations moving down the road and negotiations between Russia and Ukraine to end this war. But that was just a statement from Trump yesterday. I think they spoke for about 3 hours in Alaska, and I heard that they were going to have a luncheon after, pretty much like a dinner or something or a lunch, and it was canceled, and Trump actually returned back home to Washington, D.C. kind of early, so they didn't continue discussing anything further after that. Maybe Trump felt like he got everything he needed out of Vladimir Putin to find out what's going on here. So now from next to again, Donbass, the Russian language in Ukraine, and the security of the Russian Orthodox Church. What more does the brazen Putin want? It says leading global outlets, Axios, Bloomberg, and New York Times, citing their sources and insider information, report what Putin demanded from Trump in Alaska. This is all new information today. Here's the first one. It says Putin refuses a simple ceasefire and insists on a comprehensive agreement to end the war. Trump likes this option. We know about that right now. Also says the Kremlin demands that Ukraine completely withdraw from the Donetsk region and effectively hand over all of Donbass. So we know about this as well. We've been hearing about this for about a week now, that Putin was going to be demanding Ukraine to withdraw from the Donetsk region, which is in southeastern of Ukraine, give it up completely, which would also include the Luhansk region. That would complete the Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions in eastern Ukraine. Apparently, that's still a demand from the Kremlin. Also, Moscow wants to secure control over the territories it had seized in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions. So it doesn't look like Russia wants to give those up, and I don't see them doing that. I mean, they fought for those territories. They're most likely going to want to hold on to them. I don't see Russia, giving those up, even in exchange for some sort of deal with Ukraine. But we'll have to see what happens here. But allegedly, they still want to secure control over those. And I also heard some information that he might be asking Trump to recognize like Crimea, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson, Donetsk regions, and Luhansk as Russian territory. We've heard that before as well. So that could be possible. It also says in exchange, Putin allegedly promises not to attack or occupy new territories. Okay, so let me know if you think that Putin won't attack again if he agrees to, some sort of peace deal here. That's not all. Putin wants the Russian language to become official in Ukraine and demanded guarantees for the security of the Russian Orthodox churches. According to the sources, Trump intends to discuss these plans with Vladimir Zelensky at the White House on Monday. European leaders will also be invited to the meeting. So yeah, here's another picture of them meeting at an airbase in Anchorage yesterday. And we had like a red carpet and everything that was laid out for Putin, and Trump was very happy to see him. He was clapping for him. Yeah, we just had like a major show here right at the very beginning. There was even B-2 bombers flying ahead right over Putin and Trump as they first met. So there's just a picture there and some information on what the Kremlin is demanding. Now from Bliskovka, the main outcome of the Alaska summit is that Trump no longer demands a ceasefire from Russia in favor of a peace deal, according to the New York Times. The newspaper notes that the ceasefire was a key condition for Ukraine, which Trump backed away from. Negotiations without this are beneficial for Russia, which can continue its offensive on the front line. So this is the update today from the New York Times. Says Trump backs Putin's route for talks, dashing Ukraine's hopes for a swift ceasefire. So we know Ukraine's really been trying to push for a ceasefire. They've already agreed to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire with Russia months ago. Russia has refused to agree to that all along. So we know Russia doesn't want a ceasefire, and now what Russian President Vladimir Putin wants is a peace agreement with Ukraine without a ceasefire, which is very interesting. So, if let's say if Ukraine gives up the Donbass region, and especially the Donetsk region that has major fortifications that have been constructed over there, that could allow Russia to bypass those. And if they don't have a ceasefire, they could continue this war into Ukraine, even if a peace deal is reached. So very crazy information here. But yeah, this was an update from the New York Times today that allegedly that's the new plan here is Trump's going to be pushing for a peace settlement in Ukraine and Russia versus actually a ceasefire first. Now from NOAA Reports, the EU Council says an emergency meeting of the EU ambassadors is being convened in Brussels following the Trump-Putin summit. So the EU Council getting together holding an emergency meeting regarding the situation so they can brief each other's nation in the EU to figure out how they're going to be responding to this whole summit with Trump and Putin. So they'll be holding an emergency meeting today. Now for Vice Grad 24 breaking, Trump confirms that the discussions have moved from being about a ceasefire directly to a peace agreement. Here's Trump today on True Social. This is what he stated. A great and very successful day in Alaska. The meeting with President Vladimir Putin of Russia went very well, as did a late night phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine and various European leaders, including the highly respected Secretary General of NATO. It was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. President Zelensky will be coming to D.C., the Oval Office, on Monday afternoon. If it all works out, we will then schedule a meeting with President Putin. Potentially millions of people's lives will be saved. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So let me know how you think about this. Do you think this is the right way to go directly to a peace agreement without a ceasefire? Or should we have an unconditional ceasefire first and then move towards a peace agreement? We know that's what Ukraine is wanting, but it looks like that's not the direction most likely this is going to go anymore because Russia doesn't want to ceasefire. And also Trump is jumping on board backing Putin with this proposal. So allegedly also after Trump left from Alaska and heading to D.C., he did make a phone call with President Zelensky. Then we had European leaders jump on that phone call as well, and he briefed them on the way back to Washington, D.C. Here's another report now from Knoll Reports. It says CNN reports that Trump told Zelensky and NATO leaders Putin does not want a ceasefire, preferring a comprehensive deal to end the war. During the call, Trump said, "I believe a quick peace deal is better than a ceasefire." Bloomberg writes that Trump may begin pressuring Zelensky to cede territory in exchange for a truce. And this is what I expected. I had a feeling that after this meeting was going to come about, that we were going to see no ceasefire in this war, and then soon after, we're going to see Ukraine be presented a deal that probably they're not going to be in favor of. And what happens if they reject this deal with Russia? What is going to be the repercussions for that? How is the United States going to respond? Could they withdraw support for Ukraine militarily, also intelligence and whatnot? A lot can really happen here, and it's something that I talked about like a week ago, and it looks like we could be possibly moving in that direction. We'll have to see what the actual agreement is going to be between Russia and Ukraine before Zelensky decides to make a decision on how to move forward with that. Now, World Source News 24/7 breaking. New York Times reports an official states that Zelensky will use his Washington trip on Monday to gain insight into Trump's plan. Kyiv is confused by Trump's abrupt removal of a ceasefire requirement for negotiations and unclear about possible NATO security assurances. Yeah, so apparently Ukraine's very worried now, considering that, a ceasefire was not achieved, which I think most people were expecting that to be the case. Now that we're not moving towards a ceasefire anymore, we're going the route of what Russia wants. At least that's what Trump is wanting to do. Now it's kind of turning the tables here on Ukraine. Ukraine's not going to get a ceasefire right now, and we're going to be moving straight towards a peace agreement. So lots of pressure is going to be put onto Ukraine now, and Ukraine's going to have to start talking about ceding territory. More than likely, at least that's what Trump is going to be pushing more than likely towards Ukraine here very soon. Now for Max 25, the leaders of the Coalition of the Determined will gather online tomorrow. They will hold a video conference on Sunday afternoon ahead of President Zelensky's visit to Washington. The meeting will be co-chaired by Macron, Merz, and Starmer. So we'll be having the Coalition of the Determined, also known as the Coalition of the Willing. These are top leaders out of Europe. Here's photos of them. They'll be holding a phone call tomorrow to discuss this upcoming meeting between Trump and Zelensky on Monday. Now, Max 25 again, European officials and Trump discuss possible Article 5 style security guarantees for Ukraine outside NATO as part of a potential peace deal, according to CNN. Now, that's interesting. So we have heard this before. I think it was Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. She actually proposed that a long time ago. She said, let's just give Ukraine Article 5 protection or style protection without inviting Ukraine into NATO. And according to this information from CNN today, possibly that could be in the works. We'll have to see in terms of like security guarantees for Ukraine, if Ukraine will get anything like that, but that could be a possibility in the future. Now from Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he made a statement today on X. He said, "We had a long and substantive conversation with President of the United States, that's Donald Trump, we started with one-on-one talks before inviting European leaders to join us. This call lasted for more than an hour and a half, including about an hour of our bilateral conversation with President Trump. Ukraine reaffirms its readiness to work with maximum effort to achieve peace. President Trump informed about his meeting with the Russian leader and the main points of their discussion. It is important that America's strength has an impact on the development of the situation. We support President Trump's proposal for a trilateral meeting between Ukraine, the USA, and Russia. Ukraine emphasizes the key issues can be discussed at the level of leaders, and a trilateral format is suitable for this. On Monday, I will meet with President Trump in Washington, D.C. to discuss all the details regarding ending the killing and the war. I am grateful for the invitation. It is important that Europeans are involved at every stage to ensure reliable security guarantees together with America. We also discuss positive signals from the American side regarding participation in guaranteeing Ukraine's security. We continue to coordinate our positions with all partners. I thank everyone who is helping. So just a major statement here from Zelensky today, talking about this meeting or phone call that he had with U.S. President Donald Trump just several hours ago. Actually, it was earlier this morning. So yeah, apparently it was a good phone call. We'll see what happens coming up on Monday. European leaders, again, should be showing up in Washington, D.C. as well. So that's good for Ukraine because Ukraine's been saying that for a long time. They want Europe to be involved in these discussions. So we'll probably see some sort of representatives coming from the EU as well to show up in Washington, D.C. Now from Max 25, Merz, who is Friedrich Merz, that's him right here, the German chancellor. He commented on this whole situation saying, "We welcome Trump's efforts to stop the killing in Ukraine, end Russia's war of aggression, and achieve just and lasting peace. Ukraine can count on our unwavering solidarity as we work towards a peace that safeguards Ukraine's and Europe's vital security interests." Okay, so there's just a statement from Friedrich Merz today, the German chancellor. Also from Emmanuel Macron, he commented on this situation today as well. This is from Max 25. "We are aligned in stating that it is essential to continue supporting Ukraine and exerting pressure on Russia as long as its war of aggression continues and a solid and lasting peace respecting Ukraine's rights has not been achieved. That any lasting peace must be accompanied by unwavering security guarantees. In this regard, I welcome the United States' willingness to contribute. France continues to stand resolutely by Ukraine's side." So there's a statement from Emmanuel Macron, the French president, today, also showing firm support for Ukraine as they try to find a peace deal or a way to peace in this war with Russia. Now from Savchenko Volodymyr, according to Starmer, the next step should be further talks involving Zelensky, as the path to peace in Ukraine cannot be determined without him. He noted that security guarantees for Ukraine from Europe and the U.S. would be crucial in containment of Putin going forward, and that countries would tighten the screws on his war machine even further with new sanctions until he stops his barbaric onslaught. So UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer coming out with a huge statement also saying that the EU is going to continue to step up sanctions onto Russia and standing firm also with Ukraine and stating that Zelensky needs to be involved in these negotiations. That's why we're going to be seeing Zelensky heading to meet with Trump this week, and then we'll see if we get a trilateral meeting at some point in the future, including Vladimir Putin with Trump and Zelensky. Now from Nexta, decisions about its own territory will be made by Ukraine itself. EU leaders issued a joint statement following their talks with Donald Trump. Here are the key points. Europe is ready to help organize a trilateral summit between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump. Ukraine must receive ironclad security guarantees to effectively defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. No restrictions should be placed on the armed forces of Ukraine or on their cooperation with third countries. Russia cannot have a veto over Ukraine's path to the EU and NATO. Decisions about its own territory will be made by Ukraine itself. International borders must not be changed by force. Support for Ukraine will continue. So huge statement. This was a statement by President von der Leyen, President Macron, Prime Minister Meloni, Chancellor Merz, Prime Minister Starmer, President Stubb, Prime Minister Tusk, and President Costa. Okay, so huge support coming out from the EU and just kind of laying out the Europe's demands here and their red lines for Ukraine. We've heard a lot of these already, and a big one here too is that Russia cannot have veto power over Ukraine's path to the EU and NATO. So, even the EU coming out strong and saying that Ukraine needs to be able to get in NATO at some point. Russia cannot block that. So, these are a lot of major things that I see Russia not agreeing to end the fighting inside of Ukraine. So, again, I think we're at the very beginning of where these negotiations were even taking place back in Istanbul, months ago. Is nothing's really changed here, is what I'm seeing. Both sides are kind of demanding the same thing. I mean, Russia has a few different demands, like, for example, Ukraine giving up the Donetsk region and whatnot. But we have heard in the past that Russia wanted Ukraine to withdraw from all the regions that they're fighting for right now. That includes Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson regions, and then this war would be over. So for the most part, nothing appears to be really changing. It's just kind of the same demands we're hearing from every side. Now from Ukrainian Review. Trump did not lose, but Putin clearly won. Former Trump National Security Advisor Bolton in an interview with CNN. This is what he stated. Putin avoided sanctions. He is not threatened by a ceasefire. The next meeting is not scheduled. Zelensky was not told anything about it before this press conference. This is far from the end, but I would say that Putin achieved most of what he wanted, and Trump achieved very little. The entire military base is now available to the Russians, at least to some extent. These are secret stealth aircraft. Everyone in the Russian delegation can be suspected of espionage. I do not think that such a meeting should have been held at this base. So this was him right here. Trump's former national security advisor, Bolton. So he was on CNN talking about this, and these were some of the statements he was making. So pretty much just coming out and saying that, Putin got everything that he wanted and Trump didn't. Trump wanted a ceasefire. We didn't get a ceasefire. Putin is evading sanctions right now. We're supposed to be seeing some major sanctions coming down onto Russia and its trading partners. We're not going to see that, at least not right now. Could Trump change his mind later? Maybe it's possible. But yeah, he's kind of saying that, this whole thing is far from ending. We're not going to be seeing any kind of ceasefire or end to this war anytime soon. And we did hear a few days ago, actually, I think Trump was saying that it could take several months for an actual peace deal to get, go into effect between Ukraine and Russia. So still very tough situation. I don't see this war ending anytime soon. Now for Military News UA, I want the military actions to end as soon as possible and move on to resolving issues by peaceful means. The meeting with Trump brought us closer to the necessary decisions, says Putin. This was Putin today speaking to security officials at the Kremlin. And that was what he was stating here, that he wants this war over with. We've heard that so many times, but if he really wanted this war over with, he would agree to an unconditional ceasefire with Ukraine. We're not seeing that. So clearly, Vladimir Putin wants more war inside of Ukraine. Now, Anton Yurenko, Medvedev presented his glowing analysis of the meeting between President Trump and Putin in Alaska. He even managed to avoid nuclear threats this time. Here's a translation of his post. Okay, so this is actually Dmitry Medvedev right here. He's the deputy head of the Security Council out of Russia. He's also the former president. We've been talking about him many different times over the past few weeks. And it says here, first results. Number one, a full-fledged mechanism of meetings between Russia and the United States at the highest level has been restored. Calm without ultimatums or threats. Number two, the president of Russia personally and in detail presented to the U.S. President our conditions for ending the conflict in Ukraine. Number three, following almost 3 hours of talks, the head of the White House declined to escalate pressure on Russia, at least for now. And number four, important, the meeting proved that negotiations are possible without preconditions and simultaneously with the continuation of the special military operation. Number five, most importantly, both sides directly placed responsibility for achieving future results in the talks on ending hostilities on Kyiv and Europe. So that's a big one here. Number four actually is probably the biggest statement he made here. And he's kind of right about it, stating that this meeting proved that, negotiations are possible even with the continuation of war inside of Ukraine. That we're not seeing Trump coming out and slamming Russia with sanctions, putting any really heavy pressure on Russia. I'm really surprised we're not seeing that because Trump said he wanted to reach a ceasefire with Russia, but, obviously I don't think he was really super optimistic that he was going to be reaching an agreement with Russia on that because we did not even see that anyway. But yeah, Russia has been able to prove that even with Trump's threats and whatnot, they can bypass those threats, those sanctions, still continue this war inside of Ukraine. and they're starting to direct it themselves now. They're starting to get what they want, and what they want right now is a comprehensive agreement, for peace in this war versus a ceasefire first, which is what Ukraine wants. So very interesting statements from Dmitry Medvedev today. Let me know how you feel on those. Now from Anton Yurenko, Peskov's statements following the meeting of President Trump and Putin in Alaska. So this is Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman. And he says the conversation between Putin and Trump was very positive. Their statements following the talks have been comprehensive. That's why it was decided not to take questions from journalists at the press conference. Their conversation allows to confidently continue walking along the path of searching ways of settlement. Okay, so just some statements here from Dmitry Peskov today, kind of reiterating the same claims that the Kremlin always says, that they're still trying to work out some sort of settlement and deal to end this war. So I understand that's not in English, but these were the statements he was making on Telegram today. Now Anton Yurenko again. Reuters reports that First Lady Melania Trump handed Putin a personal letter about abducted Ukrainian children. President Trump reportedly personally delivered it at the meeting. The contents have not been disclosed, but it is known that it concerned the abduction of Ukrainian children during the war. Interesting article today, and it says Melania Trump sends letter to Putin about abducted children. So we don't know too many details on this. This was reported by Reuters today, but this is something that we've talked about many times, that a lot of children in the occupied territories of Ukraine that are under Russian control, they've been abducted, many of them taken into Russia. And there's even been statements sometimes where the Kremlin was actually open to giving over some of these children who were abducted back into Ukraine in exchange for Russian troops. And this is something that Volodymyr Zelensky had declined at some point. They said they would not negotiate any of these Ukrainian children for exchange of Ukrainian or Russian troops in Ukrainian captivity. So yeah, crazy story today. I wonder what's going to come from that. Maybe we'll get more details in the future. But Melania Trump, she's been really trying to push Trump to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin recently. And we've been hearing some statements from Trump that Melania really supports the Ukrainian people, and she's not okay with Vladimir Putin's destruction of Ukraine and killing lots of innocent civilians. So interesting report today. Now from next breaking. Zelensky says that Russia is preparing new strikes. In the coming days, the occupiers may try to intensify pressure and attacks. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, the Kremlin needs this to secure more favorable conditions in negotiations. Moscow is again betting on terror. So this was Zelensky was stating today, that Russia's preparing new strikes onto Ukraine, and this would not surprise me. I mean, for the most part, a lot of these negotiations are over, at least the Trump and Putin summit is, and we're starting to see more drones going into Ukraine again. Yesterday, there was somewhere around 95 or something like that, 97. Today, we have close to that again, right around 90 or so going into Ukraine. We'll go over that report in just a minute. And think about this too. The Russians over the last week have probably been saving up a lot of drones, so they can probably launch some massive attacks. We haven't seen really very many missile attacks inside of Ukraine as well. So the Russians probably have some pretty large stockpiles right now they could start launching into Ukraine. And I think we could possibly be seeing that this coming week. And it looks like Zelensky is getting prepared for that with Ukraine's army. Now from Drone Bomber. It says approximate flight routes of our UAVs. Red arrow indicates directions of strike UAVs. Blue arrow indicates directions of jet-powered UAVs. All route information is based on Russian sources. So just wanted to briefly go over some attacks that were taking place inside of Russia overnight. We did have a lot of drones going into Russian territory, but not a whole lot of news on what was being hit today. I think it's just because of these negotiations between Trump and Putin. A lot of the news is directed towards peace talks right now, but we did have a lot of attacks taking place inside of Russia last night. See a lot of drones going down here to the southwestern portion, Krasnodar, Stavropol, Rostov regions. We do have a report out of Volgograd today. We'll talk about that here in just a minute, but some drones also heading on up over to Bryansk, Kursk region, even a few rocket drones being used last night as well. But again, not too much information today on what was being hit overnight, but still a pretty large attack being carried out by Ukraine last night. Now look at this from Military News UA. Russian media reports a new fire at the Volgograd oil refinery. Okay, so just 2 days ago, we talked about this. We talked about the Volgograd oil refinery as it came under attack by Ukrainian drones. And yesterday I gave you guys a report that the Volgograd oil refinery is pretty much shut down. They've halted oil intake at this facility, and it took 19 hours from 2 days ago for emergency crews to put out the fire. And now today, there's reports of a new fire. So I don't know if Ukraine attacked it again overnight. Maybe they did. I haven't been able to confirm that. But all we know is a second fire has broken out at the Volgograd oil refinery. So it is burning once again. More destruction to that refinery. Now for Max 25, Ukrainian air defense shot down or suppressed 61 out of 85 drones and 0 out of 1 Iskander-M missile. All right, so we did have one missile going into Ukraine overnight. It was not shot down, but aside from that, 61 out of 85 that were going into Ukraine were taken down overnight by Ukraine's air defense forces. So, yeah, as we can see, these numbers are starting to creep up now, okay? Yesterday was at like 95-ish, somewhere in there. Now today, up to 85. So we're starting to see these numbers going up again. And I think we're going to be seeing in the hundreds here very soon if we start to see more of a stall in these negotiations. I mean, I'm sure Putin right now is probably trying not to launch as many attacks to derail negotiations with Trump, or maybe force Trump to start putting pressure onto Russia with sanctions or whatnot. But yeah, we could be seeing some major attacks here on Ukraine very soon, as because the Russians are launching such small attacks right now, they've probably got a major stockpile of drones and missiles. Now, our final update today from the Kyiv Independent. These are the indicative estimates of Russia's combat losses as of August 16th, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And here's our final update. Russia's losses as of August 16th. 1,010 troops, 2 AFVs, 137 vehicles and fuel tanks, 6 tanks, 42 artillery systems, 152 UAVs, and 2 special equipment. Okay, so not too big numbers here. Pretty much about the average that we have been seeing. Artillery systems up a little bit. We did have some special equipment being destroyed. Tanks and AFVs, still very low numbers here. Vehicles and fuel tanks, we've been seeing these numbers up a little bit more recently, which is interesting because for a long time we saw like 75 to 100. Now we're seeing more closer to like 150 daily for like 3-4 days now. Aside from that, troop numbers still about the same. We usually see about 1,000 losses on the Russian side every day. So I want to thank you guys very much for tuning in for today's update on August 16th, 2025 on Saturday. And I'll continue to follow this situation regarding negotiations between, Trump, Putin, Zelensky, and whatnot. And we should be hearing some big news coming up on Monday. And just a little friendly reminder, tomorrow I most likely will not be here. Sundays are usually my daily allocated day off each week. So usually I try to take that off, spend some time with myself and the family. But otherwise, guys, I will be back on Monday on August 18th, 2025 to bring you some more news. So I want to thank you so much for being here. Let me know what you think about all these details down below in the comment section. But that's going to be it for today's update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. And we'll see you in the next one.